So if you push so hard and break the deal apart, does that really help your client? When you think about negotiating, the first thing you have to understand that it's not about winning. It's not a win-lose.
What does best deal mean? Best deal tends to mean an agent thinks that's the highest price for the seller or the lowest price for the buyer. Identify what we can live with giving up and what we really want.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Level Up Podcast with myself, Greg Harrelson. This is where I focus on taking you from agent to entrepreneur. As you know, I have a passion for developing agents. And on today's episode, I'm going to share another quick strategy on how you can increase your production. I'm going to be real, so you be ready. Let's level up.
This is Greg Harrelson and my partner and co-pilot Abe Safa, and we are coming to you with another episode of the Level Up Podcast. Going to talk about negotiations today. So, Abe, we came up with the title, The Secret to Real Estate Negotiations. I'm wondering, do we actually have a secret, or, is it just one of these things that, there's a few things that people do in any type of negotiation in life, not just real estate negotiations, but just in negotiations in general, that cause it to fall apart. I actually think there's more deals lost because of poor negotiations amongst the two real estate agents and how they're going back and communicating with their clients. It's the poor communication between real estate agents and then poor communication between listing agent and client and seller and buyer's agent and buyer. And if we could clean up those things, I think that there's a huge upside. So what's your starting thoughts on just negotiations and the secret to negotiations in general?
Yeah, absolutely, Greg. This is a great topic, one of my favorites. And I think it's one of the most important things that we do. I mean, obviously, we're salesmen in the business, and what comes with sales is negotiating. I mean, whether it's a seller, whether it's a buyer, whether it's the other agent, there's so many times inspection, sometimes appraisal, so many times throughout the transaction where there has to be some negotiating going on. And I think this is one area that gets overlooked. So I'm not sure the tighter secrets in negotiating. I'm not sure if there's secrets. I mean, we're not going to come up with something here that's never been heard of before, but it is stuff that's not common in the industry. And it causes some pitfalls for a lot of agents. And I see them trip over these often. So I think it'd be great to discuss these things.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges, Abe, is that when people think about negotiations, they think about, they have to be pushy. But it's not. Like, negotiations and sales are not necessarily the same. Maybe there's some crossover. But what you're doing is we're seeking common ground for all parties to win. And in the negotiations, there's some strategies, right? And how we communicate. We surely don't want to convey to a seller don't want to start off like presenting an offer, which is the first step in negotiation, is presenting an offer. That's where you throw the first pitch, right? And I have so many agents sometimes they'll talk to their seller and say, hey, look, I know this offer is a little bit low, but at least we got an offer. We just need to leave that out, because that little dialogue right there is going to influence their state of mind and going to cause them to resist compromise. Now, you may think, well, that's just such a little subtle thing. Yeah, but if you do a few subtle things over and over again, it comes out to be a significant thing. And now all of a sudden, people are taking a position, but it's not a position that's going to lead them to success. And I think people are always taking positions, So I would say, I think you're a great negotiator. What are some of the things I think mentally that you think about when going into negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, you said something that was spot on. You said finding common ground, right? And I know a lot of agents out there that are thinking, well, common ground. No, I mean, that's not representing my seller or my buyer. I represent my client. And my job is to make sure that my client gets the best deal or the best price possible. But a lot of times, you pushing hard for getting the most for your client ends up hurting. So if you push so hard and break the deal apart, does that really help your client? Mm-hmm. Right? So yes, 100%, you've got to do what's best for your client. But a lot of times putting the deal together and making sure that their property is sold or making sure that they actually bought the property, is the best thing for your client. So I think the first thing you have to, when you think about negotiating, the first thing you have to understand that it's not about winning. It's not a win-lose. This is a sporting event, right? This isn't a boxing match. You don't just win or lose. Okay, your job is to put the deal together, get common ground sometimes, right? Most times. Sometimes, one side a little bit of an edge. Sometimes the other side gets a little bit of an edge. But your job is to get the buyer and the seller and you and the other agent to come together at some point where everybody walks away happy. Okay, everybody walks away with something they can live in, and nobody walks away. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, if one side feels like that they're not getting heard or they're not getting something out of it, it's going to break the deal anyway. So getting the mindset that, look, this isn't a win. This isn't about winning. This is about actually putting a deal together. What do I need to do to get the deal done?
You said something that just sparked something. I just said here, I like that.
No.
It's not about winning. It's not, but people can feel like they lost.
Right.
If they feel like they were not heard. So like somebody says, hey, look, well, I think we should, I don't know, this is a low offer. Let's counter at $400,000. And then I immediately just say, hey, look, I don't think you should do that. I don't think it's worth doing that. And we need to counter at $380,000. It's like, hey, look, that's fine. And maybe that's the right thing when it comes to the numbers. But could you have communicated that differently? Say, hey, look, $400,000 is definitely an option. So let's talk about that. How did you come up with $400,000 as a potential counteroffer? Well, they started at $350,000. And I just think that they started off too low. And if I go down to this, they're going to go down to this. And then I'm going to have to come down to this. And I'm not going to come down to this. And all of a sudden you start realizing that the reason they came up with their $400,000 counteroffer was all based on emotions, how they feel, and it's like, once I know that it's not based on logic, but I hear them and I let them get that out. And I say, hey, look, I understand. So what you're telling me is that you may have a little bit more room, maybe around $390, you would do the deal, but you're afraid the way that they threw out the first offer, you're afraid that the negotiations is almost useless anyways. Yes, they're probably not going to come up. And I say, okay, well, let's give them an opportunity to pay us what we want. Let's give them an opportunity to say yes. They could say no, and it lets you off the hook because you don't have to sell it for any number that you don't want to sell it for. But so they could say no, but you know what? Let's give them an opportunity to say yes. Now, all of a sudden, the person feels heard. And even if they get less than what they wanted, but they feel heard, I actually suspect, Abe, based on your comment a minute ago, that they don't feel like they lost. They may not feel like they won, but they don't feel like they lost. I don't want my client feeling like they're losing. And I think people feel like they lose when they don't feel heard. The other thing that I thought of, you used the term best deal. And Abe, I think you are spot on that this is what the agents think their job is. But what does best deal mean? I think best deal, would you agree that best deal tends to mean an agent thinks that's the highest price for the seller or the lowest price for the buyer? Is that what you think, kind of like agents think about best deal?
I think that's where their mind defaults to. Yeah.
It defaults to that, right? Yeah. So back in 2008, 2007, I was getting people the best deal, negotiating the best deal for my sellers by having them set the record in that given year, or at least at that moment, for selling it at the lowest price.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if I was, while my competition had all these listings in 2007, and they were trying to get the seller the highest price, and inventory was stacking and stacking and stacking and stacking, I said, you know what? The best deal for my seller is to get out of this condo, sell it at a low price, reset the market, and then watch all the other listings follow. And then guess what happened? The day that I convinced my seller to sell it at a low price, he reset the market. And by the end of the year, he had sold the property at the highest price. So the best deal was getting him out of the situation at a low price based on my experience, anticipating that the prices were going to go down lower. So the moment that we did the deal, my seller didn't know whether or not I was really out for him or out for her. They didn't really know if I was really representing them. But a couple months later, they knew exactly what I was doing. And that was the best deal possible. So the best deal doesn't necessarily mean the highest price or the lowest price. It can mean various things dependent on what their motivations, their urgencies, and their needs are.
Absolutely. And years later, you've got clients still thanking you for helping them get out of those condos as they were declining. There's no question about it.
Yes.
So another thing, Greg, is, and I think that's really important in our industry, period, but especially in negotiating, is emotions. Like, you've got to, as an agent, like, you have to control your emotions. Number one, you've got a buyer that's usually pretty emotional. You got a seller that can get emotional as well. You got the other agent that can get emotional. So your job, I think, always in the transaction, it is to be like the grounding source. Like, you've got to get people grounded. You've got to get the emotion. You got first of all, control your emotions, right? So you don't get out of control. And then as well, make sure that everyone around you, the buyer, the seller, the other agent, also keeps their emotions in check. Nobody freaks out. Everybody stays calm. That's the best way to actually get a negotiation done. Leave the emotions out of it. Look, it's a transaction. The price might be a little bit lower than what the seller wanted. The price might be a little bit higher than what the buyer wanted to pay, right? But keep the emotion out of it. That's the only way you're going to get to a place where everybody can come together.
Yeah. Just like a doctor, right? They can't get emotionally attached. They can't get emotionally involved in the transaction, or they start to make mistakes. It is one of the reasons why I believe that the real estate agent is so significant to the transaction. One of the most important things that an agent can do is remain detached and emotionless. That doesn't mean you don't care. It just means that you're not attached to the commission check, the deal closing, or whatever, so you can really think clearly and make the best decision for your clients. The clients themselves, their job, and we wish they weren't so emotional, but heck, when we're buyers and sellers, we're emotional. I mean, I just went and bought a house recently, and there was emotions involved. That's why, I end up, when I buy property, a lot of times I'll go to you, Abe, and I'll say, hey, can you check this out and tell me what you think? I go to Brendan. Hey, can you tell me what you think about this? So I can make sure that I get a non-emotional, a non-attached, unbiased opinion. Because I know even myself that no emotions don't belong in the transaction. I can't help but be somewhat emotional. So I think that's good. I tell you, I've used this technique that I never used before you told me this, and I'm gonna share with you what it is. It's so basic, but dang it, I never thought of it, never used it. Tell me, let's just share with the audience your technique on the sleeping on it, or you delay, like when you're in a negotiation and you think somebody should do X, but they're stuck on Y, you tend to not let them make a decision and you delay it for a day. And then tell me, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about, because I think that's a brilliant technique that more people need to use.
Yeah. So especially in negotiating, I think we always have to keep the ball moving forward, even if it's inch by inch, right? So sometimes, look, it comes together real quick. It's easy, but sometimes it's actually, you got to work for it. So as long as you're moving the ball forward, you keep proceeding quickly. Now, if we get to a point where a decision is made, either buyer or seller, depending on what side you're representing, that is actually going to stall the deal or kill the deal, that's when you pause. That's when you give it time. Let him sleep on it. So if my seller is stuck, look, I'm not going to budge. Like, with $2,000 away, I'm not going to budge off the price. Look, before I get back to the buyer's agent with this answer, why don't you just sleep on it? Talk it over with your wife. Let's you and I regroup in the morning. And if you still feel the same way, I'll go back to them and let them know. How's that sound? And they always do. And usually by the time they sleep over to talk about it over the evening and come back the next morning, they're calmer. They've had time to reflect, and they realize, like, okay, maybe I'm not making the best decision, but at least we've given them a chance to not make a mistake. before we actually kill the deal, let's at least try to save it. So a lot of times that'll help. So I think the rule of thumb is this: look, if the decision you're making and that call you're about to make to the other agent is moving the ball forward, then go with it. But if it's going to stop the deal or kill it, then pause for a minute. Give your client a little bit of time to be sure that's what they want. And then at that point, if it's still the same thing, then you move forward with that decision.
I love it. And what I noticed as I started doing that, I noticed that what I feel like I've noticed is that you're allowing the client to experience what it's like to almost have their property sold. And they have to experience okay, now we're back to step one. Like when they first get an offer, there's optimism, right? It's like, I'm optimistic. Maybe this is going to work out. Maybe this will work out. Maybe we can move. And then all of a sudden, then they are let down when the offer's, dying. So they just said, no, we're not going to do anything more, basically kind of kill the deal, let them sleep on it. Then they have to sleep on it and experience what it's like to start all over. And then sometimes the next morning they get up and you know what? Well, maybe we'll make one more attempt, Abe. See if they say, I'll do this. See if you can get it done at this one. And then next thing you know, that one little movement sealed the deal. So I just think that for those listening, you can do that. Not only is it a sleepover, it to me, where I've used it a few times lately is right at no matter where we were in the negotiation, if it was just tell them no, it was a done deal. I would just, in my mind, I was like, okay, what do I have to say to my client to, as Abe says, to hit the pause button and just say, why don't we think about this? Let me look at a few other things. Think about this on your own. I'll call you at the end of the day and let's just kind of regroup and just make sure that we've considered everything. Whatever it is, that little delay, I don't know what the percentage is, but I've got to assume it's greater than 50% of the time. I get my seller to move forward, even if it's an inch. At least 50% of the time, I at least get another swing at it.
Absolutely. And at the very least, yeah.
Go ahead, please.
And at the very least, you're giving your client time to really be sure that's what they want. Yeah, I think that's important. So, those 3 tips right there, Greg, will be very helpful to agents if they kind of stuck with those. But another thing I want to make sure we mention before we run out of time is look, don't get tunnel vision. Especially with these kinds of contracts, there's more to the deal than just price, right? There's a lot of different terms. So a lot of times we get so fixated on one thing, which is usually the price. Okay, we forget about the closing costs. The closing date. We forget about whether they're buying it as is or not doing an inspection, no appraisal, things like that. It's really important not to get fixated on one thing. Make sure you look at all the different terms. Make sure you've discussed all the terms with your client. And then at that point, let your client know, hey, which of these 5 or 6 different things are most important to you? We're not going to, and I tell my clients all the time, look, we're not going to win every single battle. You don't like the price, you don't like the closing date, you don't like the earnest money. We're not going to win every battle. Let's give them a couple of things. Which of these 5 things are most important to you? Which 2 or 3 things you really want me to fight over? And then let's just find the 2. And I go back to the agent and say, look, we're going to give you the $5,000 closing cost. We're going to give you the closing date that you wanted. We'll give you the 14-day due diligence, but he's really stuck on X and Y. Can you make that happen? So I think the ability to be versatile and flexible when it comes to negotiating is going to help you put more deals together. Just your job, just don't get fixated on one particular thing.
Identify what we can live with giving up. And what we really want. We're in any negotiation, typically you don't get everything. If you get everything, then then you have remorse and you're thinking, oh gosh, I did something wrong. Why did they say yes to everything? What do I not know? We always get that remorse, right? And that uncertain feeling, right? So, most successful negotiations, they're going to be give and take. So identifying and singling out what are some of the things that, you could give in if you could get these things, and then narrow down. Don't take a position on everything. Save a few things to give and calculate it and understand what it's going to cost you, whether it be money or time or whatnot. But I think that's another good point. Well, hey, I know we want to keep these podcasts a little bit shorter and give more content and better content in shorter bursts of time. And so, we'll kind of end it from here. But I want to say one thing for those of you that would like some additional help with negotiations, taking more listings, converting more buyers. Abe and I have a great program called Agent Success Academy. We're going to put a link in the description that you can go check out Agent Success Academy. It's a group coaching program that we do live every single week. It's live and it's new content. And it's basically the content that we're building companies off of, coaching agents in our own offices, on our own teams to help them take anywhere from 15 plus listings a month, make 100 plus sales, 40 sales, whatever those goals are. Please check that out. And then if you want some free coaching tips texted to you, here's you can text the word. I think it's I see it scrolling there. Text the word tips to 843-632-5864. And Abe and I send a text every single day regarding a coaching tip. So we hope that'll help you keep your business moving forward. Abe, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for being here at the Level Up Podcast. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you get a notification every time we do this. Same thing on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button so you get a notification when we drop new content. All right, Abe. Thank you very much, man. Talk to you soon.